And it's almost like you ignite that spark back in someone's life when you give them a chance to get into that sporting environment, to have that sporting conversation, to get involved in something that they can learn, but also that can be a lot of banter around it. So it's fun, it's enjoyable. They're doing it together with other people.
But to try and actually do things that are things that that individual can do at that particular point of time is more important. And it's also very important to understand that when we say that physical activity, we're not meaning that it has to be intense, or it has to be for a particular length of time. It has to be manageable for that individual, but it should be a physical activity nevertheless.
Okay, we're live. So, hello everybody, and thank you for joining today's Unpacking Dementia session. We're really pleased to have you with us today. So today we're going to be exploring the positive impact that sport can have for somebody living with dementia. It's often assumed that sport is no longer accessible, particularly taking part in sporting activities, but that doesn't need to be the case. There are many ways we can adapt sporting activities to suit an individual's abilities, creating meaningful engagement while supporting physical and emotional well-being. So before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping. Please feel free to leave any comments, reflections or questions you have in the chat, and we will do our absolute best to answer those. If we're not able to get to them in today's session, we will absolutely respond to those afterwards. But I'd like to introduce my two guests who have joined me today, because it's an absolute pleasure to have with me Anthony from Golfing Society and Dr. Raja. So I'll come to you first, Anthony. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for inviting me today, Ruth. Basically, my name's Anthony Blackburn. I'm the founder of a social enterprise called Golfing Society. And the inspiration behind my social enterprise was my father, who was mad about sport when he was, well, throughout his life, really. And he died 18 years ago. He died not through dementia, but he died through cancer. But towards the end of his life, we used to take him at that stage, golf was his thing. We used to take him to his local golf course, and he thoroughly enjoyed a few holes, and then it was just putting, then it was just a pint with his mates. But it just inspired me to think there must be loads of other people like my dad who just need the chance to keep their favourite thing in their life. And for Dad, it was sport. So with that inspiration, Golfing Society was born. And we now run golf programs across the UK for families living with long-term health conditions, including dementia, to give them a chance to get out, enjoy a great day at their local golf club, and feel a bit more hopeful about life.
Brilliant. Thank you. It's an amazing thing that you're doing. I absolutely love that. And I know that you're supporting us with our Green Letter Days as well. So it's really exciting. And Dr. Raja, you've joined us today as well. Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Hi, thank you. That's such a beautiful story, and I think my story would stand compared to what has been said. I'm an old age psychiatrist, or as my son says, my father looks after the elderly people with dementia and their families. And the way that I got associated with Dementia Adventure is through getting people with dementia and their loved ones to go and watch cricket at Lord's. And Dementia Adventure has been hugely supportive of the initiative, and it's part of the Green Letter Days now. So I'm very thankful to them. And also I had the greatest pleasure of running London Marathon for them to raise money for the charity this year, which was such a wonderful thing to do. And thank you.
Which we are hugely thankful for. So thank you ever so much for that. And we are incredibly impressed as well, because running a marathon is certainly no easy feat. So we've got a really lovely range of experience that we can pull on today, because I think we do need to explore how sport, movement and memories can really support people physically and emotionally as well, really focusing on that those benefits. So I think let's start right there, because I'd like to come to you, Raj, and ask, what are the clinical benefits of physical activity for people living with dementia?
I think we need to look at physical activity in terms of benefits in three different ways. So there's the general improvement in circulation. Cardiovascular system gets better. We know that cardiovascular problems are significant risk factors for developing dementia as well as for progression of dementia. So trying to optimize cardiovascular activity through physical activity is one of the important things and one of the important benefits that people with dementia get from doing this. The second important thing is that such activities also stimulate the cognitive side of things. Especially, we do know that people with dementia have very important and very beautiful long-term memory that is there for the best part of their life, even when dementia starts to progress. And talking about events, sporting events that they could recall actually makes them feel more confident because they're able to talk about things that they really enjoy, and that gives them that ability to partake in conversations, to socialize, and that helps their cognition in much better sense. To illustrate this point, when Dementia Adventures kindly supported people with dementia to go and their families to go and watch cricket at Lord's, one of the ladies and her daughter wrote back to us as clinicians to say that although mom did not really watch a ball being bowled that day, she had this amazing conversation recalling the times when England won Ashes when she was young and she used to go with her parents and watch cricket. And that made the day very richer for her. So it is that degree of cognitive ability that we are trying to kindle with trying to include sporting activities. And finally, it also gives a lot of emotional improvement because when families and people with dementia go together to these kind of sporting events, they're not going there in the role of someone who needs care. They're going as in their relationship sense, and it kind of fosters that degree of normal conversation that people would have, and that encourages people to be happy and relive those very beautiful memories that they have. So to summarize, so there's the physical health side of things in improving cardiovascular activity. There's the cognitive side of things because we're starting to get people to utilize their brain, the strengths of the brain that they still have. And finally, it gives them that degree of emotional reassurance.
So it really links in with those past experiences and memories. And Anthony, that brings me over to you because I'm guessing you must see that quite a lot in the work that you're doing.
So I'm gonna give you something even more inspirational as far as I'm concerned. And I'm not a anologist. I don't have any sort of PhD behind my name, but we've delivered over 9,000 golf sessions now since we started back in 2016. And during that time, I've had families come to us who've never actually stepped foot in a golf club, on a golf course before. But the thing that brought them all together was sport sometime during their life. And it may have been football, it may have been cricket, might have been tennis, might have been hockey, might have been whatever. But ultimately, there was something that they'd had in their lives around this wonderful thing called sport. And it's almost like you ignite that spark back in someone's life when you give them a chance to get into that sporting environment, to have that sporting conversation, to get involved in something that they can learn, but also that can be a lot of banter around it. So it's fun, it's enjoyable. They're doing it together with other people.
Mm.
But the other thing is the competitive edge, that competitive spirit, whether they've played, football or whatever level, they want to go out there and win. But when they come to our golf programs, they still have that will to win. And even with all of the challenges that the dementia is bringing to their cognitive function, those things are hardwired. And what we do is we found a way through the programs that we deliver to spark that individual back into a sporting life. But I'm going to finish this little bit of inspiration with when I started Golf in Society with no track record behind me in terms of dementia. It was just the sort of inspiration of my dad. When I said to people what I was about to do, teach people with dementia to learn and play golf, they thought I was crazy myself. But in that time, we have had 7 holes in one. Now, for those people that don't understand golf, that is like winning the Olympics. That's like winning the World Cup. It's something that all people who've hit this little white golf ball aspire to do in their life. And you've had some wonderful golfers that have never ever had a hole in one. But on through our golf programs, we have somehow found a way to ignite that body, ignite that brain, bring that purpose back, and people achieve the pinnacle of playing golf, a hole in one. So I think really what I do is I think about health by stealth, because if I'm honest with you, if I told all the guys and girls that come into our programs that they'd done 700 odd steps around the little par three course, they wouldn't believe me. If I said to them, every time you play a golf shot, it's been shown that you make 36 executive function decisions, they wouldn't believe me. They're doing it in the fresh air. They're doing it with friends. They're having social conversations as they go around. They've got a purpose. They've got a will to win something, and they want to achieve. They're learning new things, and that is all happening in one of our golf sessions. Now, people like Raja can clinically unpack all of that, but basically, I know that we put people in a space and a place that brings them to life through golf. It could, and I'm sure the same as at cricket and football and everything else. But it's that inspirational thing that drives me to do it for more families, because I'll let the clinicians unpack it all, but I know that I bring people back to life and give them hope for the future, and they're enjoying their favorite thing. And one thing I really want to say in terms of the cognitive benefit of golf and what we do, don't forget about the unpaid carers, because a very, very stressful life, my unsung heroes in society. And basically, we give them a chance just to have a few hours to themselves and have a life themselves, relax. We all know what it's like to have your body on high alert all the time, and the impact that stress has on our well-being, our immune system, and everything else. So just to let carers decompress in beautiful green surroundings, chat to others unconditionally, is a real, probably unsung part of what we do. And I think that we need to say, I mean, you mentioned there that conversation that happened at the cricket ground. Well, ultimately, that wonderful green space, that lovely day out, those conversations can take place. And I think that's what sporting venues and sporting environments have got to offer carers as well.
I agree. And I think that brings us nicely onto actually, because when we are talking about one of our Understanding Dementia Better sessions, we talk about the different areas of the brain that are affected, like the hippocampus, which means, whatever we do goes in there, but actually dementia can affect that. So that means we might not process that and store that as a memory. But we also have another amazing part of the brain called the amygdala, and that stores our emotional responses to things. And I think, Anthony, what you've talked about is, the real life doing and how that can remain with us. But Roger, I'd really like to understand a little bit more about how those memories can be, and why sporting memories can be so deeply embedded with us, and, how we can bring those to life and what that means.
I think one of the important things to realize is that sporting memories come with a greater degree of emotional investment into those moments that we continue to cherish. Whether it's your team winning the FA Cup or your favorite player winning Wimbledon, there are always moments where we invest a lot of emotion into supporting our idols, and therefore memories are not just stored superficially; they are stored with an emotional connection attached to them. I would always go back to the time when I was in year 4 and Steffi Graf won French Open 6-0, 6-0, and that to me is one single memory that I fondly associate myself with, even in the darkest of times, to say that actually that is an inspiring moment. We can do this. So we do attach a lot of emotional resonance to those kind of sporting moments, and in a way it actually helps, because then we can start to talk about those kind of moments with people who have a similar kind of affiliation to the sport itself, or to the sporting person that we are talking about. So it's not just anymore a personal memory with a personal emotion. It then starts to become a shared collective memory that we can share with a group of people and then have a discussion about it. And then they will bring in their version of what happened then, where they were, and therefore it starts to develop into this deep, richer conversation which otherwise would not be possible if people were to be isolated. So one of the things that I would always say to people with dementia and their families is that it's not just that you're sat there watching sporting activity on television or hearing it on radio, but actually just going to the local park to watch people play, to go to the local cricketing ground or to football ground or where there are sporting activities that are happening, which may not be at a national level, may not be at an international level, but just going there gives people the ability to have those conversations. And as it was said, just walking there increases the physical activity too. So it's very important to understand that sporting events do come with a very deep emotional resonance, and giving people the opportunity to indulge in it gives them the opportunity to enhance their cognition too.
Yeah, and I think what you said there is absolutely key, isn't it? That actually, my granddad was a Man U supporter, but going to like a big Man U match, do you know what I mean? That can feel incredibly overwhelming. So actually engaging with like programs that you do, such as yourself, Anthony, or local smaller games can really empower people to still access that. And it's much, much easier, it's much, much quieter, it's much easier to be able to dip out if we need to, but also to still experience those successes, which I guess, would you say reduces isolation and can strengthen those relationships with partners and families?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is the important thing to realize, that when you bring people together, then they're not anymore in the kind of power imbalance of someone providing care, someone receiving care. When they're outside, they're all equals, and they have a conversation based on what is actually happening. And that just fosters better relationship, reduces emotional stress, burnt out feeling for family carers of people with dementia. So I think it's very important to realize that small groups, local groups with friends and families is actually very important to try and encourage people to have those routine, leisurely conversations that would have otherwise happened in their lives.
And is that something you see on your golf days, Anthony? Seeing like families sharing stories and building those relationships together?
Yes, I do. In fact, it's the warming part for me is when you work in a locale, let's just say Harrogate, and you've broadened your net to anyone who's had sport in their life who has now been diagnosed. When people come for their taster session and they come into that room to see two people who've never seen each other for 20, 30 years since they played football together, all of a sudden going, "Hello, Bob, how you doing? You used to play at Harrogate Town with me." And those types of reconnections through sport, okay, it's golf at this stage, it's bringing them together, but you're reconnecting previous sporting lives and sporting dreams and sporting conversations and friendships. And I think that is the beauty of sport and the sporting environment. It's such a great space and a place where people can come and reignite previous sporting memories, but also sporting friendships. And it helps actually make everybody feel more comfortable coming back next week because they know there's friendly faces, there's people they know, there's people they can trust, there's people they want to be with, and it gives them a reason to get out of bed on a morning. And it's quite interesting that a lot of the carers say to me, "I really struggle to get him out of bed certain days, but the one day he's always out of bed is a Wednesday morning when he knows he's going to golf." So there's something there, that purposeful thing that individual is looking forward to. And as you know, sometimes it can be challenging for carers to actually get their loved ones to a service or a day or whatever it might be. But once they've been to us, they want to come back and they want to do more. And I've got great examples where people used to come just one day a week, they now come 3 days a week because they love it so much. And that is music to the ears of the carers as well. And I think the good thing about
Yeah.
golf and what we do is it's probably the most democratic sport. Roger might disagree with me. You can ever play in your life, because if you can get that little putter in your hand and you can hit that little white ball, whether that's at a golf club, in a care home, wherever it might be, you can be a golfer. And it's something you can play until you pop your clogs. Our oldest golfer is a 103-year-old. She's in a care
That's
home
amazing.
in Glasgow, and she's basically French. She'd never had a golf club in her hand before in her life. She now loves the golf sessions that we do in the care home every week.
So
But
I
her
think to
party
balance
days,
that, I think what you're talking about there, Anthony, is about adapting, and it's maybe not about doing it in the way that you used to. It's about, can I hold the golf club? Can I hit the ball? And that being the win of the situation. I know that we've run some green letter days recently, and we've supported some care home, some cricket, sorry, in care home. And we've really had to adapt how that's played because when people do reach those later stages of dementia, then it's about thinking how can we adapt that. Now we've had a question in about are there sports or activities that work for better in those later stages, or do you feel it is actually about adapting the sport that that person loves and enabling them to access that? And so I think sometimes it's the approach maybe that changes, that it's not what we used to do, but actually can we access that? Roger, would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very important to understand that, as the dementia progresses, unfortunately, the ability of the person to do complex skills or have sustained attention for a period of time may not work very well always, and we need to take that into account. So, therefore, trying to break down sporting activities into manageable chunks becomes very important. Like, for example, so even last year when we were at Lords as part of the Dementia Adventure supported cricket days, uh, people had the ability to actually go onto the green themselves to hit. And if you want to watch a normal cricket match and you would want to see people running between the wickets, fielding and doing all of that, none of that actually happened. It was young boys, young girls throwing balls at their family members and men and women whacking it out of the ground. So the point wasn't about should we run, should we catch, should we field, but to try and actually do things that are things that that individual can do at that particular point of time is more important. And it's also very important to understand that when we say that physical activity, we're not meaning that it has to be it has to be intense or it has to be for a particular length of time. It has to be manageable for that individual, but it should be a physical activity nevertheless. So even, for example, simple things such as when you're watching TV, just to plan to say that, okay, I'm going to stand up for this length of time, I'm going to stretch myself, and then I'm going to sit back down. So that on the face of it might sound like a very simple activity, but it helps the circulation flow much
Yeah,
better.
it can make the
And that is a
difference, can
very
it?
important way of getting the muscular tone right for people to maintain their balance and stability, because we know that people with dementia have increased risk of fall. So having those kind of smaller adaptable chunks, whether it's a sporting activity or whether it's a physical activity, and have it through the course of the day is much better way of doing it.
Yeah, and I would absolutely recommend people reach out to their local wellbeing services, so social prescribing initiatives, for example, because there is so many different adaptations. I know we've talked a little bit today about cricket, we've talked about golf, but I think the overarching message that I've heard is actually anybody can do this. We can do this in a way that works for us. I know locally where I am, we've got walking football for those who want to watch football. But also, I would say I've also learned that it becomes just as important to maybe sit, watch a game together, to talk about and share those experiences. I learned a lot about football in the 60s from my granddad. It's not knowledge I've retained, but it was a real passion of his and it was a real conversation starter. So, doing like attempting it that way, planting the seed can also be really helpful, as well as going out and accessing sport directly through the different initiatives that are out there.
oh no,
So,
but
go
you
on.
just mentioned Ruth about which ones can be enjoyed later in life, and I think that what we've all got to do is we've got to remember that there is a person behind every single diagnosis, and there's different stages, and basically there might be things early, let's say with a young onset dementia, whatever it might be, that people can still do, like the walking football,
Mm.
like playing the cricket, but we've got to work on creating those stepping stones and pathways when maybe that physical function does deteriorate a little bit, that coordination isn't as great as it used to be. And I think that if we can start with the more active things that they really have enjoyed, that it's maybe sort of higher intensity, but then have that little pathway that there's some type of sport right the way through until it's not possible anymore. And I've talked about 103-year-old in a care home. So, if you get diagnosed at 52, There's no reason that in between 52 and 102 you could actually be still enjoying sport. But we've all got to work collectively together to create those person-centered sporting pathways that is right and appropriate for the individual. And I think you've got to make it meaningful. You've got to make it as real as possible. Don't dumb it down. Make it fun, make it enjoyable. And, don't be patronizing with what you do, but base it around the individual. And I think that's the key, because that's what will spark a sporting life back if you've got all those different opportunities. And I think the one, I would say this, wouldn't I? But I think the one you can enjoy until you do pop your clogs is golf.
Which brings me nicely to Patricia's question. And so Patricia is supporting somebody living with dementia, and she's asked, what can you do if the person you're supporting does not want to join in any activities at all? So we know that there's that interest there. We know that there was a passion, but how do we sow that seed? Dr. Raja, how would you suggest you just take that initial step? What would that be?
I think it's very important to understand that we need to establish what the person actually likes doing, whether it's a physical activity or a mental activity. Anything that we try to do should be inspiring, not just challenging. Challenging things can be quite frustrating for people, especially when their body and mind is not actually coping to the task itself. And then it goes down a negative spiral because they haven't enjoyed it, they've tried it, they found it frustrating, they're not going to try it again. So it's very important. It's very important to make sure that what we are trying to encourage them to do would be things that they would have normally enjoyed doing. And sometimes it's not actually doing part of it that counts. It's actually being there, having conversations. That actually becomes more important, because the activity might not be that they didn't take a cricket bat and hit, but maybe that they actually walked to that distance, and that is an activity in itself. Okay, they didn't understand the concept of the game, but they were still able to talk about the times that they play cricket. So that becomes a cognitive activity too. So we need to start defining what are those little goals that we are setting them for, rather than trying to say that it's all or none. It never is all or none. I could tell you that when I was I was someone who probably the longest I ever walked was from the car to the front door of my house 8 years ago. And then Joe, one of my colleagues, said that, why can't we go and run half marathon? And I thought, this is not really happening. And 8 years later, here I am raising funds for Dementia Adventure, running the marathon itself. So, and that comes about because you try and set achievable, simple goals that suits the mind and the body of the individual based on who they are as a person. So that's very important to understand.
So I think that really brings us to a close for today's session. But I think the overarching learning that I'm certainly going to take from today is that it isn't about the ability. It really is about the connection, the identity, and the joy that that brings. And my overarching message to any of you on this call would be, celebrate those small wins. Like if it is just the getting out the car to the golf course, that's the win. We can take the next steps the next time. If it is watching and talking about the cricket or the football, then that's the win, because each one of those is really going to cognitively ignite the brain. And that's an absolute win for anybody living with dementia. So thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a really interesting topic. I could talk about this all day. But for those of you who would like a little bit of support joining a sporting activity, our Green Letter Days are on our website. Do have a look at those. Both Anthony and Raja have supported with those, and I know that you've seen the difference that they can make. So they're out there, they're fully funded. Do come along and join us for one. But in the meantime, look after yourselves, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.